Welcome to Writing Black Joy Season 1. I am Sophia Robinson, and I'm a writing coach, editor, story listener, and the producer of Writing Black Joy, a virtual space that celebrates and centers the voices of Black writers with joyful stories. Here, you'll find my conversations with some of my favorite Black writers and storytellers, learn more about their projects and the joy they are bringing into the world, and find inspiration for your own creative ventures, as well as tips for writing poetry, blogs, creative nonfiction, fiction, plays, and so much more from all types of writers, as well as a sneak peek into writing life. You could even find your next favorite writer, book, poem, play, or blog. And if you are a Black writer who is looking for a coach or an editor to help you bring your joyful story into the world, click on my website below and find out how you can work with me. In the meantime, let's go to today's guest. Hey everyone, welcome back, and I'm so pleased today to have with me Javacia Harris-Bowser, who is the leader of one of my favorite writing communities on the internet and possibly in real life soon, hopefully, C. Jane Wright. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. So Javacia is a blogger, a freelance journalist, a writer, and an entrepreneur based in Birmingham, Alabama, and the founder of C. Jane Wright, a membership organization and a website for women who write and blog. So because of C. Jane Wright, Javacia was selected as one of the smartest women in Birmingham, which I have no doubt about. And that was by the Women's Fund of Greater Birmingham Smart Party Committee, selected as one of Birmingham's top 40 under 40 by the Birmingham Business Journal in 2015. And also honored as one of Birmingham's Women Who Inspire by Girls on the Run. She's a professionally trained journalist, and she has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Alabama and a master's degree in journalism from the University of California at Berkeley. Javacia continues her professional writing career as a freelance journalist, columnist, and blogger. And as you can see down in the corner, she also loves C. Jane Wright. So I'm so glad I met you in there. I often think about how I came across it randomly on the internet one day.
I know, I love it.
I love it too. So that is awesome. Tell us a little bit about your writing journey. When I joined your community, you were still a full-time teacher.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot more to it than that. So tell us a bit about your writing journey and your career as a writer.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me here. So my mom says that I've been writing since I could sit up straight.
I love it.
So I've always been a writer. It's how I understand the world. It's how I understand myself. So it's just something that I've always done. And then I also like to know things. Like I just like to know stuff. And I like to get to know other people. You know how a lot of writers are introverts?
Yeah.
I'm not one of those. So, I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love getting to know people. And I realized that journalism is basically the perfect profession for an extroverted writer.
Yes, you can just go and ask people questions. I have to heard somebody talking about this. They're like, if you want an excuse, like just become a journalist. So you can just go and ask people questions.
No, I totally do that. If there's somebody that I'm admiring from afar, I just pitch the idea to write a profile of them, and it gives me the opportunity to get to know them. I do that all the time.
I love that. That's such a good idea. Yeah. That's great.
So, I mean, when I was a kid, I did all sorts of writing. So I wrote poetry, short stories, all that. When I was in high school, I took a journalism elective, and that's when I kind of first, stumbled on the idea of becoming a journalist. And so in college, I studied journalism, but I minored in creative writing. In graduate school, I studied magazine journalism specifically, but I also was a part of this program where I taught poetry as well. So I've always kind of had that journalism and creative writing thing going. I like to call myself a multi-passionate writer because I like all types of writing.
I know what you mean.
And so, as you mentioned, I was a teacher. So back up, I was a newspaper reporter for several years, and I left that to teach because that was something that I always wanted to do as well. So I left that to teach full time, but I continued to freelance. And then in 2019, I left the classroom to become a full-time freelancer. And of course, to work on CJ Knight.
Of course, yeah. I'm curious, a bit curious. I know you said that you, obviously you have this dual, like you've done your journalism, which I always think of journalism as like more hard facts and that type of thing versus like the creative writing side. Do you find that it's really helpful to have a bit of creative writing to go into the sort of fact-based pieces that you write?
Yeah, I think so, because I do mostly feature writing as opposed to like hard news. So I'm not like covering politics or things like
Right,
that.
okay.
I'm doing more feature writing, and I definitely think having that creative writing background helps me with feature writing, because with feature writing, you're telling a story.
Yeah.
So it's based in the facts about the person or the topic that you're writing on. You're not making it up like you would if you're writing a short story. I mean, you're not supposed to, but you're still telling a story. And so, yeah, I definitely feel that the creative writing background helps me with that.
Yeah, and you had a course recently that I took, which was about your personal story, like using your personal story when you write. And I really enjoyed that because I think sometimes people almost feel like they leave it out because they're like, nobody's interested, or like almost like it's more professional to be professional and not have that personal story element in there. But I really like how you sort of encourage people to kind of bring that in, because that's what makes, you know, your writing really connect with the reader, is like, oh, there's a human being that wrote this and not like a bot or whatever. So
exactly.
Yeah, I really love that. So you obviously agreed to join me on this, and you know this is all about writing Black joy and joyful stories by Black authors. Tell me why that's important to you.
I love that you're doing this, because and I think lately more people are talking about Black joy, but
Yes.
I feel like it's long overdue. And it's something that I hope continues, because too often when you hear stories about Black people, it's always about the struggle, always. And yes, we need awareness about that struggle. Yes, we need to be working to change the system that has oppressed us for centuries. But that is not all we are, right?
For sure not.
And so that's why I think stories about Black joy are so important, because they show the complexity of the Black experience. And we just need more and more and more of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, like, whenever I think of it, I always think of it as like almost like a scale. Like, you want to reduce this thing here, which is like this oppressive system, but you also want to increase, on the other hand, the joyful and the hopeful narrative, so that there is something, I don't know, I always think of it as like, when you remove this thing, what are you going to fill it with? And I love the idea that a part of what you're filling it with is this joyful narrative. So I'm really glad that so many people have agreed to join me. And I love this because I've had like poets and playwright, like people who've done all different types of writing. And I love that you can bring that joy into whatever you're writing, whether it's a novel, whether it's nonfiction, or whatever the case is. So I really love that. I asked everyone to bring a quote. It doesn't have to be your favorite quote, but you are always full of the best. Like, listen, follow Javacia on Instagram, all right? I'm gonna have her link, because Motivation Mondays, they're always the best quotes in there. So like, I would love to hear one of the quotes that you're kind of feeling drawn to recently.
Yeah, so this is a quote that I haven't shared before, but I felt like it really sort of encapsulates this idea of Black joy, and specifically this idea of yes, there is the struggle, but we're more than that. So there's this book called The Black Book, and most people don't even talk about it, but
I've
it
heard
came
of it.
out in like the 70s.
Okay.
And it's basically an exploration of African American history through all of these primary documents. And Toni Morrison was the editor of this book, which a lot of people don't know.
Wow.
And so when it was re-released, with a preface that is a poem that she wrote. And so this quote is from that poem. And to give a little bit of more background, the poem talks about, it's written in a way that it kind of touches on all of the things that make up the Black experience, including, the struggle. But this piece right here, to me, represents the joy, and so I love it. It says, "And I am all the things I have ever loved, scuppernong wine, cool baptisms in silent water, dream books, and number playing." And so that idea of you being all the things you've ever loved, I just love that concept so much.
I really love that. I don't know, when you said that, it just made me think, like, I was saying because I had another conversation right before this one that I recorded, and I was saying it was with a friend of mine that I grew up with, going to school with, and I'm thinking back on when I was a teenager, the types of books I like to read. Like, I was fortunate growing up in the Caribbean. We read a lot of Caribbean authored books, but they were always heavy. And then I would read these light-hearted books, but they were always like people skipping through the English countryside. I don't even know why. I always thought that's why I went to England. But it's nice to think that, like, I love that thing at the time, and it's nice to feel like that's also a part of me too. That, I don't know, that just, I really love that. That's one of my favorite quotes of all the interviews that I've done. So, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm gonna see if I can link to that book. Do you say there's an updated version of it now?
Yeah, it was recently released, or not recent, I can't remember what year it was, but it's called The Black Book.
Yeah, recently as in since the 70s.
Right.
It's fine then. I get you. No problem, that's fine. So that's great. Tell me though, what has been your proudest moment as a writer? I just read through a whole long bio. Folks, I cut a lot out of this bio, but Javacia is a very distinguished writer. So, but what's your proudest moment that you feel like, I'm really glad I achieved that as a writer?
Honestly, it just happened like a couple of months ago.
I love that.
So yeah, and it's not in my bio because I haven't updated my bio in a while. So I recently received a fellowship from Alabama Council on the Arts, which is this organization based in Alabama, which is where I'm based. And they give out these grants to artists, different types of artists. They'll do like a poetry fellowship. They'll do one for nonfiction. They'll also do one for, visual arts and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I received a grant recently. I was selected as a recipient of the fellowship. And that was a really big deal for me because I almost didn't even apply for it. Because when I think, and I was always aware of it, like this fellowship has been around for years and I never even considered applying for it because I'm a journalist first. Like I feel like I'm a journalist first. I never feel like my writing is artsy enough, because even when I'm writing essays, which, if I'm writing personal essays, so that's an opportunity where you can be kind of artsy, creative, and all of that. But that journalist in me is always there. And so I feel like my writing is just never artsy enough. And I'm okay with that. Like I accepted that because I was like, I'm a journalist. That's how I pay my bills. So I accepted that. And so because of that, I'd never consider even applying for this. But a friend of mine who also has a journalism background received the fellowship a year or so ago. And so she encouraged me to apply.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, fine, whatever.
Whatever.
I'll do it just, to say I did it. So I did it and then forgot about it because I was like, I'm not going to get this anyway.
What was the point? I love that.
So I'm not going to sit around like thinking about it because I know I'm not going to get picked anyway. And then one Friday, I get a phone call and I answered it, which is crazy because I never answer my phone. I guess that was God being like, answer the phone.
Answer the phone, Javacia. You know you want to.
So I answered it and yeah, exactly. So I answered it and it was them calling saying that I got selected. So
I love that story so much, especially because I like that you said, I wasn't even going to do it. And then you did it anyway and you got it. And I think sometimes that's the most like juiciest reward, isn't it? When you it's so unexpected. I have a kind of unrelated question to ask you, because I know you are a journalist first, and I am just about the farthest thing from a journalist that anybody could ever find. And I was saying to one of my guests a little while ago, I really struggle writing to a brief. Like if I sit there and I come up with an idea, it's like, yeah, I can write, really creatively, but I struggle with writing to a brief because I feel like when I do it, I feel like I'm at school. So all of like my sister had read something I wrote to a brief a little while ago, and she was like, where are you? I feel like you've totally disappeared out of this thing. And I'm curious, I know we talked a bit about this earlier with your creative writing background, but like, do you think that's something that just takes practice? I'm sorry, this is just a real personally selfish question of mine.
Oh, no, it's totally okay. And yes, I do think it takes practice. It's something that I struggled with when I was a student journalist. I remember in grad school, because like I said, I focused specifically on magazine journalism. And so that was the kind of journalism where you need to put your voice in it and tell a story. But previously, so before grad school, I was very focused on hard news. I had an internship with the Associated Press, which is like, that's the news organization. And so that was what my training was in, because again, as a student journalist, I wasn't really doing feature writing. I was doing politics and crime and fires and things like that. And so, but that's not what I wanted to do, right? So I knew that's not what I wanted to do. So I wanted to do more feature writing. And so I struggled in grad school. Like my instructors were always telling me, they're like, you're not at the Associated Press anymore. Like, you can put more feeling in this. So it was very, very difficult for me at first, but because it felt wrong. It felt like that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. But then I've learned that it's easier to put your voice in things when you are more confident in what you're writing. So if you feel like you know your subject well, then for me personally, when I feel like I really know what I'm talking about, like I know this subject matter well, I know what I'm talking about, it's easier for me to relax. And then when I can relax, I can put my voice into it.
Oh, I like
and I can tell a better story as well.
Yeah, and it's probably more readable because, I mean, yay, hard news, but also like I struggle sometimes. Like I always had this thing. I spent a long time in the UK, and there are like the magazines like the Times. I guess there's probably the equivalent in the US, but there's like the Times, the Sunday Times, and Telegraph, and it was the kind of thing to like buy it to seem really smart. But I would struggle to even read it because I'm just like, my eyes starting to glaze over. I'm getting lost. Whereas when I read something that has a bit of personality in it, I feel like I connect to it more, and I actually will read it. So I'm glad that you say it takes practice, because maybe there's hope then for those of us out there who feel like I do. So thank you so much for that. Tell me a bit about another maybe struggle that you have had in your writing journey. Like, what's a difficulty that you feel like you've sort of had in your writing journey that you kind of had to overcome, other than leaving out your personality?
I guess sort of along the same lines of that, when I am writing personal essays, I tend not to include enough detail because, again, because I'm a journalist and I'm so used to like, okay, this needs to be quick, right? We've got to get to the point.
100 words, like,
right, we got to get to the
time
point.
for fluff.
And so because of that, sometimes I don't include enough detail when I'm writing a personal essay. So that's something that I still struggle with. I'm getting better, but I still struggle with it.
Understood. And do you ever get writer's block? Like, that's the question I always ask. Like, what do you do when you get writer's block? Or if you get it?
I guess technically I get writer's block, but not the kind where it's like, oh, I just can't write anything, and because I don't have that option, because I write for a living.
Exactly. Like, you gotta write something.
Right. So when I do feel stuck, if it's a reported piece that I'm doing, if I'm stuck, it's usually because I didn't do an outline. I'm a really big believer in outlines. I use Post-it notes to outline my stories.
I love that.
And so if you come into my home office, usually you can always tell if I'm working on a story, because if so, there'll be Post-it notes all on the door of the closet. And so I use that for my outline. And if I'm stuck, it's usually because I didn't do the outline. If it's a personal essay or something more creative and I get stuck, what I usually do is I go for a walk.
Yes.
Moving my body always helps me. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I do the outline with Post-it notes, because it requires me to like get up and walk over and, move the little notes around and all of that. So it's actual movement. It's something about the movement that really helps me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm the same. I feel like walking definitely helps me, but I never thought about the movement. Like, sometimes even when I'm outlining stuff, I have to sit on the floor and have it like all around me, which sounds really strange. But like, one day I was when I was writing my first book, I was like struggling to map it out. And I just had this almost like, just go and sit on the floor. Like, what? But like, literally, I would sit on the floor and have like probably the bigger pieces of paper, so not Post-it notes, but like I just had to have them laid out in front of me, all around me, and then physically move them around. But I never thought about the movement aspect of it. So that's good to know. I'm gonna remember that. That is great. So tell us a bit about CJ and Wright, actually. I know I didn't ask you to prepare anything, but that is one of my favorite places in life. And I know that it's your baby, for lack of a better word.
It is my pride and joy. So CJ and Wright started out as just a local organization for women in Birmingham. When I moved back to Birmingham, because I'm from here originally, I moved back here to teach, but I knew I wanted to continue to write. And I also knew it would be easier to do that if I had women cheering me on. So yeah. I was looking for a women's writing group, and I wanted one that accepted all types of writers, because as I mentioned earlier, I consider myself a multi-passionate writer. And I couldn't find one that was for all types of writers. Like, everyone was just for like romance or children's books and I was like, I don't do any of that. So I kept looking for it. I looked for 2 years, couldn't find one.
Wow.
During those 2 years, and I kept asking people, like, do you know of any groups? they would always say, no, you should start one. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing that.
No, please.
But then I finally did 10 years ago. I started it. And so it started out as just a local group. And what I would do is I would host different events every other month or so on different topics. But then somehow, I guess the internet, people outside of Birmingham, then people outside of Alabama, and then even people outside of the country.
US, yeah. Because like that, I'm so glad that this opened up, because if you'd have stayed local, like we would not have met. So I love that you've opened it up. And I know you've got people in there from like all over the place now as well, which is
all of these other people started finding out about it, and so I started doing the events virtually, and this is before COVID, but of course that really came in handy last year. That things were already virtual for us, so the events again became virtual, so I do different workshops. But then I have the collective, which is the paid membership program. And so the people who are a part of that, they get access to a resource library and group coaching and critique sessions, and we do write-ins and all of this stuff. So
yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm going to put all the information on the page so that if anybody wants to come join in the fun, hopefully they can come and join us. Tell me, if you could, you've already given us so much information, but like, what is something you would tell a prospective writer? Like if somebody, joined CJ Write tomorrow and they were like, I want to be a writer, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, just write.
Yeah, there's that.
Write as much as you can, read as much as you can. But I do think it's important to set a goal and then start developing a plan to accomplish that goal. So instead of just being like, I want to be a writer, but what does that look like for you? Because there are so many different ways to be a writer. So what is your goal? So set a goal and then develop a plan to accomplish that goal. And the resource library that I offer to CJ Write Collective members, it exists to help you do that, to help you set that goal and to help you develop a plan to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, because when I think about, like, even though I've can I say that I've ever thought to myself, like, I want to be not a professional writer, but that very first time I set like a proper writing goal was when I started my blog, and I was like, I want to write the 39 lessons I learned before I turned 40. This was like 2 years ago, before I turned 40. And like just hitting that goal was like magic. I can't even, there's no other way to describe it. And it kind of gave me so much courage to then set and reach other goals as well. So I really love that as a starting point. You talked about reading a lot. I love that you talk about reading so much, because I love to read. Like I always tell people, like, forget being a writer. If somebody could pay me to read, I would be the happiest person alive.
That's the thing, you can get paid to read.
Yeah, maybe we need to have another conversation about that. But anyhow, tell me, what do you like to read?
I like to read almost anything. And when I say that, I like almost every genre. So I like to read nonfiction, and fiction and poetry. Within those categories, so for nonfiction, I typically like self-help, memoir, and like inspirational stuff. Mm-hmm. And then for fiction, I usually like mysteries. And for poetry, I usually like stuff written, well, with all these categories, mm-hmm. I typically like stuff written by women. Sorry, guys.
Not sorry.
I mean, I read male authors too, obviously, but yeah. I primarily read female authors. But yeah, that's what I like to read.
Is there anything you've read recently that you feel like really made an impact or has really stayed with you?
I am reading 3 books right now.
Oh, yes. sisters. I love it.
But two of them are fiction. The other Black girl, and While We Were Dating. So I'm reading both of those right now. Both of them are good. The nonfiction book that I'm reading right now is the Magic Art of Tidying Up, or whatever it's called. You know,
Marie
that
Kondo. Marie Kondo.
The Marie Kondo book.
The Life-Changing Magic, I believe it is.
Yes, that's it. The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. So I've had this book on my bookshelf for forever, like since it came out, and never read it. And I would even like read articles about it and get the tips from that.
Oh my goodness.
But not actually read the actual book.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah.
So I am in the process of trying to like completely revamp my house. And so I'm actually reading it now. So.
And are you actually doing it as well? Because I have to say, like, I feel like reading like a self-help book, for lack of better words, and doing the things in it are like two completely different activities. Like I can think about all the
yes, they are. But I am a planner, which anybody in teaching right knows that I'm a planner. And so I've already planned when I'm going to do the things in the book. So this was my week to read the book, and then next week I'm going to start doing the things.
Doing the stuff, yeah. And I know you will, because you are a planner. I absolutely love that. Some days I'm kind of, and this is something I think we probably spoke about it a few years ago, because I love planning too. Over the years, I feel like my relationship with planning has become a bit difficult, because I've done some really great unplanned things. And so sometimes I feel this push-pull between like planning. I always call it the planning versus magic, like dichotomy that I have, because sometimes like when I think of some of the things that I've done, it's been during the times I haven't planned anything. And I feel like sometimes when I plan things, I plan small things. And I know you talk about having big goals. This is something that I think I need to, I have been working on, because I've always, in the past, I would plan things that I knew I could achieve, like I set a SMART goal. And then I feel like the year that I planned nothing, I achieved something that I actually didn't think I would have achieved. So I never planned it. So how do you sort of settle the planning versus the fact that like sometimes you're more capable of something than you realize?
Yeah, I think it's about, like, I always have a plan for each day, but I also leave myself open to possibilities. And I have the freedom to do that even more now than I did when I was a teacher. I couldn't do that quite as much when I was still teaching full time, because my schedule was just so insane. But now I have more of the freedom to do that. Like, for example, that fellowship that I was talking about earlier, the days that I worked on that application, obviously working on that application disrupted what I had planned for those days, right? And so I had to make the decision that I'm going to push some of these things that I have planned. I'm going to push this to next week so that I can work on this application. And so, because planning or applying for that isn't something that I had planned for, because it's not something that I was going to do. But I made the decision to push some things so that I could apply, and I'm really glad I did. So yeah, I think it's about having a plan, but still being open to other possibilities. And as far as like, how do you balance that? Because, if you're always just open to everything.
Yeah, then nothing, you may not actually get anything done. It's too much chaos.
Right. So for me, my like test is this possibility that's been presented to me. Would doing this move me closer to my overall vision for my life? And if the answer is yes, then I make room for it. If the answer is no, then I don't.
You're less likely to make room for it. Yeah, I think that's a really great test. And I think it's it also requires you to have some level of vision for your life. But I love that sort of almost litmus test. Like, otherwise you just end up, as you said, it's complete chaos because you end up taking on a bunch of things that you know, sometimes afterwards you're like, I shouldn't have done that. That was not, right. I should not have made the time for that. So I totally get that. Well, I really appreciate you joining us. I would love for you to tell us where we can find you. But I have all the resources on the page, but like, where can we find you? Where can we follow you like a stalker, other than Instagram, which I highly recommend, by the way.
So the C. Jane Wright website is cjanewright.net. So you can find the website there. If you want to join our free Facebook group, just search for C. Jane Wright Network on Facebook. You can join our free group. If you want to join the paid collective, enrollment will be reopening for that soon. So you can go on and apply on the website and be on the wait list. As far as social media, other than the Facebook group, I'm always on Instagram, like always. On Instagram. So you can find me at C. Javacia Wright. That's also my Twitter handle. I am not always on Twitter. I should be, because Twitter is like the best social media platform for writers, but I don't like Twitter. So I'm like sometimes I forget Twitter exists.
Yeah, I'm the same. And when I started this project, I belong to a group of editors, and they were all like, have you put it on Twitter yet? And I was like, oh yeah, Twitter.
Right. It's terrible too, because Twitter is perfect for writers. It's the perfect social media platform for writers. Mm-hmm. And yet I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't either, but I try to remember it at least once a month. So, we'll see. But yeah, that is perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Somewhere on this page will be a link to go and find Javacia out there in the internet, and also a link to read something that she has written. So thanks for joining me. Appreciate your time, and I will see everyone soon. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the notes below, and don't forget to hit subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new episodes when they drop. And if this has inspired you to get your own writing project into the world, click on my website below and learn how you can work with me as a writing coach or an editor. Until next time, I send you big love from a small island.